Order. Gareth Johnson to move the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Howarth. I move the motion that this House does consider vaping. Mr. Howarth, I'm pleased to secure this debate because I've been interested by the phenomenon of vaping for some time. There are now millions of people vaping in the UK, and many of them are former smokers. And this is an important issue because if many of the reports and studies carried out on the issue of vaping are correct, then vaping has the potential to save thousands of lives in the UK and millions worldwide, and therefore it has to be worth looking at very carefully. Mr. Howarth, I say straight away that we all know that smoking is bad for you. Indeed, over half of smokers will die from the activity of smoking. Yes, most certainly.
Thank him for securing this debate. He's making some excellent points. When I look at my own constituency of Nottinghamshire, there's a class dimension to this as well. Managerial and professional occupations, 8% of people still smoking cigarettes. That rises to 26% of the Nottinghamshire population when it comes to routine and manual occupations. So there is a social justice as well as a health issue. It is much cheaper. It is much safer. So there should be no taxing. People should stop deterring it in public places because he is right. We have finally found a way to stop smoking. We should celebrate it. And I say that declaring an interest as somebody who has stopped smoking and now vapes.
Well, Ms. Howarth, it's good to see some enthusiasm for this issue, which is what this debate is about. And the Honourable Lady is absolutely correct, is that it does tend to be more vulnerable people, I'll put it that way, that tend to be affected by smoking. And smoking is something that affects the whole of society. Hardly anybody who doesn't know somebody who has died from smoking or who's been seriously affected by the consequences. And I think, therefore, we have, as the Honourable Lady quite rightly says, potentially here found almost a silver bullet that we can actually, at long last, tackle the issue of smoking for those people who want to stop smoking. Because, yes.
Does he agree that more needs to be done with our young people in relation to the dangers of smoking and also for vaping? How can we achieve that?
I think what's very important is over the last 20, 30 years, we've moved away from this sort of James Dean image of smoking. It's now no longer seen amongst many people as being cool, which was the case, I think, when I was growing up, that it was seen somehow as being an acceptable thing to do. I think vaping has helped to ensure that actually it's vaping that people look to now in increasing numbers rather than smelly tobacco, if I can put it that way. And I think it's now increasingly recognised that there's a huge problem with that. The danger is, though, is that unfortunately the statistics say that more and more people in this country are viewing vaping as being more dangerous than smoking. And that is a dangerous thing. It's quite clearly the case, which I'll come on to later in my speech, that actually vaping is a lot safer than smoking tobacco. But unfortunately, the public perception of that is different to the actual facts that are presented by some reputable organisations. Going on, Mr. Howarth, we know that there are now something like 7 million people smoking in England alone. Something like 8 million people across the whole of the UK. And so it does create a large number of people who potentially can benefit from vaping. And I have to say, although we've spoken briefly here about smoking, I'm not trying to be nannying at all in my approach. If an adult wants to smoke, then that's their choice. And I don't seek to lecture people on their tobacco use. It's an individual choice, but it needs to be an informed choice. And therefore, we should not obstruct people who want to access smoking cessation products, and vaping forms an important part of that. I don't claim in any way that vaping is risk-free. Indeed, I would urge anybody who doesn't smoke not to take up vaping. There are risks involved, and it's unnecessary for non-smokers, to take that risk. What I urge is for our approach to vaping to be evidence-based. When the government is deciding on issues that affect vaping, it should be based on the best possible evidence available and not treated in the same way as tobacco, simply because the phrase e-cigarettes has been adopted to describe products used for vaping. We need also to be open-minded and objective about the pros and cons of vaping. Our views may change as more research is carried out, and that's fine. We may over time be more negative or more positive about vaping, but it should always be based on the facts available and not on a general dislike of smoking. Mr. Howard, I'm not a medical man at all, and I'm certainly not anyone who claims to be an expert on health issues. So I've looked at some of these reputable organisations to see what they have to say about vaping, and it does make incredibly interesting reading. For example, Cancer Research UK have said, the evidence to date shows e-cigarettes are far safer than tobacco, even in the long term. They also say there is growing evidence to suggest that e-cigarettes can help people stop smoking. And that's a pretty clear position from Cancer Research UK. The British Heart Foundation have also looked into the issue of vaping, and they said e-cigarettes are not harm-free. We would not advise non-smokers to take up e-cigarettes, but they can be a useful tool for harm reduction and to stop smoking. And they also point out, that, of course, that long-term studies aren't available just yet. And that's a point, I think, that's frequently brought up in this debate because of the relative newness of vaping. We don't have the long-term studies that many people want to see. And I think, as I say, we need to be open-minded about this. But what we shouldn't do is turn our backs on the opportunities that vaping offers simply because we don't have those long-term studies. I think it would be wrong for us not to engage with vaping for the next 50 years while we wait for long-term studies to be carried out. The opportunities are here in front of us today. Yes.
Thank the Honourable Member for giving way. Is he aware of the first major study of this into helping pregnant smokers quit, which is being led by Professor Hayek of Queen Mary University, working in conjunction with Barts? And does he accept that while there are apparent health benefits for pregnant women to switch to vaping if they are unable to give up smoking traditional cigarettes otherwise, it would be sensible to wait for the report to be published in 3 years' time before making major interventions which might encourage pregnant women to start vaping when they're not already smoking?
I'm not aware of that report. I think there's an inherent problem for pregnant women today to wait 3 years to make that decision. My gut feeling is yes, of course, the best approach would be for pregnant women not to actually smoke anything at all, not to smoke any tobacco products and not to vape. Whether or not it's beneficial for pregnant women to vape instead of smoking if they're unable to give up tobacco, I'm not qualified to answer, and therefore I wouldn't want to comment on that particular report. But it does throw up very interesting things. This is why I believe that this whole issue should be fact and evidence-based rather than an instinctive dislike of tobacco products and therefore lumping vaping in with that. If I can move on as well to the British Lung Foundation, who've also commented on this. And they've said that given half of long smokers die as a result of their habit, using vaping to help someone quit smoking could literally save their lives. And that's the British Lung Foundation that have made that comment. They're also very clear that vaping shouldn't be seen as a permanent alternative to smoking or promoted to non-smokers, but nor should it be banned in public in the same way as smoking is. Public Health England also very famously in the vaping world have said very clearly that they believe that vaping is 95% safer than smoking tobacco. The Royal College of Physicians and ASH have also chipped in with very similar comments to these organisations. So there's plenty of evidence there that there is potential with these products, but they have to be judged on their own merits and not, as I say, in the shadow of tobacco products. That's why the EU Tobacco Products Directive wrongly, in my view, incorporated vaping into its directive when it should have been dealt with separately. There is a ludicrous approach to this that's taken place in this directive, and it's illustrated in the regulations they have to follow. If you buy one of these products, the actual vaping machines, there has to be a warning on them that this product contains nicotine. It says this product contains nicotine, which is a highly addictive substance. This was sent out by a company called Totally Wicked, but they all have to comply with that requirement. The silly thing is, of course, it doesn't contain nicotine. And yet it says it does, because it has to as a consequence of the EU directive. It only contains nicotine when you add e-liquid into the product, which isn't included in the product itself. So they had to put a caveat at the bottom to say, this isn't true, this is not correct, so they don't get prosecuted under the Trade Descriptions Act. And it just illustrates one example of the ludicrous nature of this approach, where you lump vaping products in with tobacco products and expect vaping organisations to act in exactly the same way. Ms Howarth, this EU directive also imposes requirements to only sell e-liquid bottles in small quantities with a maximum of 20 milligrams of nicotine, which I understand that some heavy smokers find insufficient. I don't also want to turn this into any kind of Brexit debate. We've got enough of those Brexit debates taking place in the House of Commons at the moment. There's plenty on today and tomorrow if anybody's interested. But we have to recognise that there is an opportunity after Brexit to depart from some of these regulations where appropriate. And I asked the Minister, who's here today, to put in his diary, March 2019, to consider which of these regulations can be looked at again, which ones are unnecessary, and which ones can be altered. The rules on advertising as well are very, very inconsistent. An advert on a bus is fine, but an advert in a magazine or newspaper is not okay. And the trouble is with that, it sends a mixed message out, which doesn't help either the public or the industry, and adds to this problem that we have at the moment, where increasing members of the public are believing that vaping is more harmful potentially than smoking tobacco, which ultimately stops the benefits that do seem to exist for these items, according to those people who are far more qualified in the medical field than I am. What most people do agree upon, though, is that there is a necessity for more evidence. So I'm therefore pleased that the Science and Technology Committee is about to carry out an investigation into vaping. It aims to collate the available information and give recommendations. And I hope that this committee will look at the studies carried out on the health implications of vaping and give its view on which studies should be given the most and the least credibility. The public shouldn't have to rely purely on which report is given the most prominence in the press. This will be an important exercise, but what is ultimately needed is more fully independent assessments of the health considerations surrounding vaping. The government has also launched, and I'm sure the Minister will allude to it later, its tobacco control plan. And I welcome the aim in that plan to reduce the number of people smoking in the UK. And the usefulness of vaping is recognised in that plan, and that's very much to be welcomed. Ms Howarth, I will conclude, because I know there's other people who want to speak, but I think I'd say in conclusion that vaping, yes, it's not risk-free, but it has been found to be a useful tool for literally millions of people who want to stop smoking. It should therefore be given the recognition it deserves. It has huge potential to save lives, and therefore I ask today the Minister to meet with the vaping industry as soon as his diary allows to discuss how vaping can be best utilised. We need... Yes, certainly.
Thank the member for giving way. Congratulate him on securing the debate. Just before he concludes, would he agree with me that part of the problem traditionally with smoking has been that as the decline in numbers of people smoking has bitten into the population, but we got down to about 20%, and it was very difficult then to make further inroads. Similarly, if we have a third of smokers who still haven't moved to vaping, that there is again the problem where we're getting to a hard core of people, that more work needs to be done, and I congratulate him on taking a very responsible attitude to the issue of vaping as opposed to simply endorsing people moving from non-smoking to vaping.
Yeah. I think that seems to be correct, and ultimately if there are people who want to smoke, they're aware of the risks and want to take those risks and are happy to do so, then as adults that is entirely their right. I'm not here seeking to dictate to people how they should lead their lives. However, in my experience, most smokers do want to stop. They just find it very, very difficult to do so. And as a consequence, this is why we should embrace the potential of vaping as a very, very important tool in enabling people to give up smoking. Patches, chewing gums, and all these kind of things, and even a bit of willpower every now and then, is all very well and useful as a product in themselves. But vaping does offer, perhaps potentially, the most successful way that people can actually stop smoking should they wish to do so. But we need an objective, logical and fact-based approach to vaping. In short, we should follow the evidence, which at present shows it creates, in my opinion, an opportunity that is simply too good to ignore. Thank you.
Colin Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I congratulate my honourable friend on bringing forward this topical issue. I would like to reflect on my honourable friend for Dartford has said about the ever-increasing popularity of vaping. The evidence is clear that vaping is less harmful than smoking, as it doesn't contain many of the harmful substances produced by smoking tobacco, such as tar or carbon monoxide. When it was first introduced, it was targeted mainly at regular smokers attracted by the healthy alternative. Now, in 2015, the Office for National Statistics counted 50% of vapers using this as an aid to stop smoking, and 10% of them cited cheaper prices as the main reason for moving to e-cigarettes, as my honourable member mentioned. Within a year, both numbers dropped to 46% and 8.1% citing the cheaper price. Now, one explanation is frequently given nowadays is the perception that e-cigarettes are less harmful than cigarettes, but more strikingly, the range of different flavours available. This was cited in only 1% of the cases in 2015 and climbed to 5% within just 1 year. Those numbers clearly reveal an effort made by vaping companies to diversify their customers and expand their market. My question is, and concern is, does vaping make smoking more fashionable, particularly among the young? In my Gordon constituency, in the small town of Inverurie, there are 3 vaping shops, and that's in a town of a population of 15,000 people. Now, this is hardly due to more traditional smokers looking to quit, but rather non-smokers picking up vaping. However, they may be people who are going to turn to smoking anyway, particularly the young. Again, here the statistics speak for themselves. In 2015, only 2.8% of 16 to 24-year-olds were using e-cigarettes, whilst 5.8% of them were using them in 2016. Now, the number of male users in that age category has more than doubled. So again, it would look as if young men who perhaps were going to take up smoking have turned to vaping instead. While vaping is indeed less harmful than traditional cigarettes, it still contains nicotine. In addition, my concerns are about the misuse of e-cigarettes as a way of abusing other substances such as drugs. But I keep in mind there is a very powerful lobby and vested interests in maligning the vaping industry. However, it remains to say that whether or not more people pick up the habit as a result of successful marketing campaigns, the biggest benefit is to those around vapers or smokers. Vaping is a matter of personal choice, and unlike smoking, it does not affect the health of those around you. Passive smoking kills 600,000 people annually worldwide and is one of the major causes of lung cancer. It is particularly dangerous to children. This makes vaping by far the better choice for those around people who choose to have the habit. I would encourage the Minister, I agree with my honourable friend, to engage with the vaping industry. Tobacco blights the health of our society. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Stanley Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was only going to be intervening today, but I have got other things I wish to say, so thank you for asking me to speak. The honourable member stated that vaping does offer the most successful way to stop smoking. I absolutely and fully support his contention that vaping is a valuable way to persuade those people who have failed to give up smoking using any other method. And I absolutely support any attempt to use vaping to break that hard nut of people who are so addicted to nicotine that they aren't going to be able to break that addiction. However, I ask him to confirm or deny in his summing up that vaping does actually induce a certain degree of nicotine addiction amongst people who vape and who have nicotine in the substance that they're vaping. The reduction in smoking in this country over the last 20 years has been one of the best possible advertisements for health education and health prevention measures that I can think of. It's been fantastic how many people have managed to give up smoking, including, I have to say, myself, who gave up in 2013 and have not touched a cigarette since. I gave up lots of times before 2013, but the time I gave up in 2013 was the conclusive one, and I have never used any substitution products because the problem for me was breaking the addiction to nicotine rather than the addiction to the smoke itself. And now that I have broken the addiction to nicotine, I have absolutely no intention of going back to any form of smoking product. To finish off, Mr. Howarth, can I just say that I believe that there is an issue with the nicotine addiction element of vaping. I am looking forward to seeing all the studies, including the study into pregnant women.
Gareth Johnson.
He's absolutely right. Nicotine is an addictive substance, and if you stop smoking and go on to vaping, the addiction continues. There's no doubt about that. One of the benefits of vaping is that you can actually have a reduced amount of nicotine, or indeed no nicotine at all in the vaping, which some vapers have found very, very useful when they want to come off of the addiction to nicotine.
Yes, thank you. I fully accept that, and thank the honourable member for his intervention. It is clearly a valuable tool in the attempt to reduce further the number of people who smoke. However, can I just urge caution to say that health education measures which enable and encourage people who are hard nut smokers to move to vaping are fully supported, but that further measures which make it easier for people to start vaping if they are not already smoking should wait until these studies report.
It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship today, Mr Howarth. May I start by thanking the honourable member for Dartford for securing this debate on nicotine vapour products, NVPs. I fully agree with him about the potential to save thousands of lives, and I think that is fundamentally what we always should bear in mind. I'm very grateful to him for clarifying and clearing the point about public perceptions about the safety of vaping versus traditional cigarettes. And I think that's a very important message that we need to get out there. Especially given some of the statistics we've seen from briefings that have come in that people think it's as dangerous, which clearly it isn't. I do also agree with them that we need to have a very fact-based approach, and there needs to be a lot more research done, and I'm grateful for the Honourable Member for Ipswich for mentioning some of these, and we look forward to seeing the results of those in due course. He touched on one of the most interesting dilemmas, I think, and that is the rules on advertising and anomalies, and how do we accurately advertise the benefits of this product to people who would benefit from it, the 7 million potential smokers out there that aren't vaping, without making it attractive and sexy to people who do not smoke at all and seen as something they might wish to do. So it's getting that balance is going to be quite a challenge. I don't envy anyone trying to come up with regulations that deal with that. The positive case in favour of vaping has been well made today. We know that most of the harm caused by cigarettes over other smoked tobacco products comes not from the nicotine but often from the smoke, which contains a huge number of the carcinogens. And I'm very grateful to the work of the Royal College of Physicians for their work in estimating that the hazard from long-term vapour inhalation is around 5% that of the harm of smoking. So we need to get that message out to smokers that is a much safer route to go down. More than 1/4 of all cancer deaths can be attributed directly to smoking, and smoking is associated with 10,000 deaths and around 128,000 hospital admissions each year in Scotland alone, and costs the Scottish NHS more than 300 million to treat smoking-related illnesses. So it doesn't take a genius to work out that it is in our public purse interest to encourage people onto smoking cessation products. I saw a statistic, and I apologise, I've forgotten actually which briefing I saw it, and it may have been the Independent British Vape Trade Association. It may not have been, so if I'm misquoting the group, my apologies to them, that for each person that we can persuade to move to cessation, that we can save around 74,000 in public health benefits. Now, that's a huge potential impact and something that we need to take very seriously. Smoking is, without any doubt, the primary preventable cause of ill health and premature death, which is why the Scottish Government is taking radical action to attempt to stub out smoking. We aim to create a tobacco-free generation by 2034, and smoking rates, especially amongst young people, are at record lows across Scotland. I would also share the view of the Royal College of Physicians and ASH that e-cigarettes should be regulated to encourage its use as an aid to stop smoking, but discourage its use by non-smokers, very much the dilemma that we have with advertising. In Scotland, we know that e-cigarettes are almost certainly safer than cigarettes and have a role to help people quit smoking, but I certainly don't believe that children or young people should have access to them. A public consultation paper was launched in October 2014 called Electronic Cigarettes and Strengthening Tobacco Control in Scotland, following which the Scottish Government introduced the Health, Tobacco, Nicotine, etc. and Care Scotland Act 2016. That was a bill which had cross-party support, although there were a number of concerns raised during the debates in the Scottish Parliament. But amongst the new laws it created, it banned the sale of NVPs to under-18s, made it illegal for others to buy for the under-18s, and required all shops to have an age verification policy. And I think that is very key in preventing a new generation of people using nicotine-based products. In Scotland, we've seen record investment in NHS smoking cessation services, and we know that that has a benefit, a cost benefit for every pound we spend. My own area is served by two NHS trusts, Forth Valley and Lothian, and obviously while that is under devolved competences, it's probably worth pointing out that neither of which outwardly endorse the use of e-cigarettes, as some stop smoking services do elsewhere. And while I've been unable to ascertain accurate local figures, it is known from ASH that across the UK, 3 million vapers, half of whom have given up smoking, and that around 97% of all vapers are either current smokers or ex-smokers. So vaping, clearly from the information we have available, is not currently a gateway to tobacco products, and it does help people stop smoking. So it's genuinely a positive measure. It must also help with reducing second-hand smoke, a point which the Honourable Member from Gordon made. And in Scotland, we've seen the proportion of children affected by second-hand smoke in the home reduced from 11 to 6%. I don't know what proportion of that is caused by NBB products and how much is from the Take It Outside campaign, both of which clearly contribute to that. In conclusion, there is clearly a role for vaping in helping people to stop smoking. Despite the thick throat, and I've managed not to cough today, I've never smoked in my life. However, I have many friends who have, and as I look back over the years since the smoking ban came in Scotland in 2006, I thought it was a birthday present for me. It came in on my birthday, the 26th of March, but it certainly improved the lives of many people. And I've witnessed friends who've given up, largely from that event. Now, some managed to stop through sheer willpower. That was a minority, I have to say. Others struggled and have used different cessation-measured products. And vaping is probably the most popular method from people I know in my own social circle, and it certainly makes a real difference. So vaping, in conclusion, is significantly less harmful than continuing to smoke. Harm reduction is not as good as cessation, but it is way better than smoking, and realistically, given how addictive nicotine products are, that may be the best we can expect for many people. And I believe that if we take up vaping can lead to a serious reduction in smoking. So I would welcome this debate and thank the Honourable Member for bringing it today.
Thank you very much, Mr Howarth, and it's an honour to serve under your chairmanship this morning. I want to thank also the Honourable Member for Dartford for securing this debate today. It is a very timely one and very important to discuss, especially since we've just seen the end of Stoptober, where vaping played a role in advertising. I also want to thank all honourable members for their thoughtful contributions. I welcome the array of views and opinions conveyed in this morning's debate. It is clear there is strong interest in the House on this topic. Although we might be small in numbers, I think the quality by far made up for it in the quality of the contributions. E-cigarettes have been around since the mid-2000s, but in recent years we have seen them boom. Recent figures estimate that 2.9 million adults were using e-cigarettes in 2017, compared to just 700,000 in 2012. This increase is expected to grow as more and more people turn to e-cigarettes to reduce their tobacco consumption or to quit tobacco completely. The interest in e-cigarettes can also be seen in the rapid growth and availability of these products and the advertising around them. In 2014, it was estimated that there was 460 brands with over 7,500 flavour solutions. And the British Medical Journal highlighted the growth of advertising and promotion of these products from being worth 1.7 million in 2010 to 13.1 million in 2012. So it'll obviously be a lot more than that now if we had the figures for 2017. We on this side of the House welcome e-cigarettes as part of our drive towards a smoke-free society and the role they can play in the smoking cessation landscape. However, what remains important is that e-cigarettes are regulated correctly to ensure the health of our country is improved, not diminished, which is, at the end of the day, our main goal when it comes to smoking cessation. In my contribution to this debate today, I will also use it as an opportunity to further discuss smoking cessation, which is a crucial aspect of the debate around vaping, but also the importance of continually looking at this market as we move towards a smoke-free society. Smoking cessation is crucial. It improves the health of individuals and our nation significantly and reduces the prevalence of cancer, lung disease and COPD, which we know are all too persistent right now. For a smoker who is diagnosed with lung cancer, it is estimated that if they quit smoking, even at that late stage, they will still live nearly a year longer than if they continue to smoke. And for those living with COPD, smoking cessation is currently the only treatment which can prevent the progression of the disease in smokers. And it is also seen as the most cost-effective. The cost per QALY for smoking cessation in COPD patients is around £2,000, compared to between £7,000 and up to £187,000 per QALY for drugs to control the symptoms of COPD. NICE has also estimated that for every £1 invested in specialist stop smoking services, a return of £2.37 will be generated, as it will save on smoking-related diseases and ending loss of productivity. So hopefully these issues will be addressed as the government implement their recently published tobacco control plan, and it is welcome that e-cigarettes have been included as part of this work. Yet e-cigarettes must never be seen as a silver bullet to see our vision of a smoke-free society achieved. E-cigarettes are a crucial player in the cessation landscape, but they are not the only player. It is important that we maintain the position set out by research and evidence by the World Health Organization and in the Tobacco Control Plan that nicotine replacement therapy is 4 times more effective when prescribed by a doctor and monitored than just bought over the counter, which is where e-cigarettes are currently acquired. It is important that smoking cessation is a wide-ranging package that reduces smoking in society, but sadly the government's current actions are, I have to say, undermining this approach, as the King's Fund and the Royal Society of Public Health have both identified public health cuts will reach 800 million in the 5 years to 2021, and in 2017-18, spending on tobacco control services faced cuts of 30%. Now, this is concerning, as Ash has identified that a growing number of local authorities is no longer have a specialist stop smoking service accessible to all smokers. And even if we look across the wider health service, it is clear that there are failures to implement NICE's guidance on smoking cessation. An audit of the British Thoracic Society of 146 hospitals found that 27% of hospital patients were not even asked if they smoked, and provision of NRTs and other smoking cessation treatments in hospitals were classed as poor. Now, is this something the Minister is aware of, and is he ensuring that some action is taken? Excuse me. It would be welcome to know what the Minister is doing to address these genuine concerns and his thoughts on promoting vaping and other smoking cessation for inpatients during their stays in hospital, something I know that Professor John Britton has championed and chimes well with the position set out in the Tobacco Control Plan to, and I quote, promote links to stop smoking services across the health and care system, and full implementation of all relevant NICE guidelines by 2022, end quote. I'm sure he knows that quote well. He published the Tobacco Control Plan, which I was very pleased about. This all shows there are serious concerns within the smoking cessation landscape and worries for its future in our move towards a smoke-free society. Whilst it is important that vaping is included as part of this landscape, it cannot detract from the other treatments we have now and not allow them to wither on the vine because something new and shiny has come along. Part of this comes from the fact that evidence is still not definitive of the impact of e-cigarettes on our health. And whilst Public Health England's review of vaping products showed that they were 95% less harmful, which is excellent, than tobacco products because of the lack of carbon monoxide being inhaled and the reduction in the many other health implications that comes with smoking tobacco, this does not mean there are not concerns or split opinions over the health, harm and safety of these products. It is paramount that these views are continually looked at and we review our positions on these products on a regular basis. That is why it's welcome that Public Health England will be publishing their update on vaping research and evidence by the end of this year. And I'd also welcome if the Minister can outline plans to evaluate heat not burn, as although not vaping, they are another product on the market seen as a way of limiting and reducing harm from smoking. The impact of these devices also needs further research. I will give way.
I didn't mention the heat not burn products that are available simply because I couldn't really find any information out there that was independent as to whether or not it was beneficial to your health or not, or whether it was still dangerous. So I'd be grateful if she could enlarge on any information she's found out about these products, because I found it very difficult myself.
I don't think I know much more than the Honourable Gentleman, which is why I've raised it. I think there does need to be, I have put some questions in about heat not burn. I think there does need to be some independent research, because I think the manufacturers of heat not burn have done their own research and have quite strong claims that although they are still a tobacco product, that they are far less harmful. But we do need independent research to back that up before anybody can sort of substantiate that. So can the Minister update us on when this will be happening, or the research into vaping and perhaps heat not burn, as we are coming to the end of the year, and as he will be aware, if we see any delays on reports or plans being published, then I will of course be on his case. It is also welcome that the Science and Technology Select Committee will also be looking into this matter, and I will be keeping a close eye on the developments of this inquiry, whilst also looking forward to their findings. It is important that we take a pragmatic approach when it comes to e-cigarettes, and as reflected in Public Health England's statement in 2016, which had the support of 12 charities, and I quote, "We all agree that e-cigarettes are significantly less harmful than smoking, but we must continue to study the long-term effects," end quote. This is something we on this side of the House agree with, as it is clear from the evidence we have so far that e-cigarettes are far less harmful than tobacco smoking, but the evidence remains inconclusive. This is why monitoring must be maintained to ensure we fully understand the impact of these products, both in the short and long term. Finally, Mr Howarth, I want to end by just saying this. The Minister has had a lot to think about during this short debate this morning, and I'm sure he will address each and every one of the points raised in his response. But I just want to implore the Minister that as part of his response to this debate, that he remembers the wider smoking cessation landscape and how important it is to ensure that vaping is included as part of this wider package that is sustainable and effective in reducing smoking in society and thereby improving the health of the nation. Thank you.
Minister.
Mr Howarth, thank you very much. And congratulations to my honourable friend, the member for Dartford, for securing another debate in this House. As my shadow has said, this is a very timely debate. We had an excellent 3 hours in the House only a couple of weeks ago on the government's new, I suppose it is still new, tobacco control plan. I want to say a little bit in the time I've got about the state of the evidence as we see it on e-cigarettes, how they fit into our plans to cut smoking further, and touch on vaping by young people, which a few people have mentioned this morning, and a bit about our approach to regulation. So, Mr. Howard, e-cigarettes were a popular subject during the debate in the House on the TCP. I think every speaker, bar none, mentioned them in one way, shape or form. So there's a lot of interest across the House in them, and I think that reflects the radical changes that we've seen in the popularity of alternative nicotine-delivering products in recent years. We've moved from a position where the nicotine delivery market, if I can call it that, I think we need to find a better term than that, is dominated by the traditional cigarette, to one where we have a much wider range of nicotine-delivering products. Around 2.4 million people in England now use e-cigarettes. That represents huge, huge growth over the last decade. We can't be complacent, however. The member for Dartford referred to the number of smokers. We still have 7.3 million smokers in this country. 200 people die every day due to smoking. It's still the biggest preventable killer in our country. The financial burden that this puts on the NHS in England and other public services is obviously huge, as is, and that is, of course, dwarfed by its impact on people's lives and the unnecessary loss of people's loved ones. Let's remember, a regular long-term smoker loses an average 10 years of their life due to the habit. It's a high cost. The tobacco control plan that we published sets out stretching ambitions to reduce over the course of this Parliament adult prevalence to 12% or less, the prevalence of 15-year-olds who regularly smoke to 3% or less, and of pregnant smokers, which a number of members have raised this morning, rightly so, to 6% or less. I think we've been somewhat criticised for that not being ambitious enough. And that's why I stress or less, because they're not targets. They're the absolute maximum that I expect to see. We want to do better and beat those, of course. We want to reduce the burning injustices that see some of our poorest in our society die significantly earlier than the richest in our society. So, as we've said in the plan, we'll focus on people in routine and manual occupations where rates are higher. We want to focus on other groups particularly affected by smoking, such as people with mental health conditions, those in prison, and pregnant women. So in the debate, colleagues on both sides of the House highlighted the increasing role of e-cigarettes they're playing in helping people quit smoking. We heard all sorts of examples from honourable members and honourable members of how parents, friends, family members have used these cigarettes to wean themselves off smoking, and it's always good to hear, Mr. Howard. Let's be clear. The debate lead said this in his opening remarks. Quitting smoking and nicotine use completely is the best way to improve health. However, the evidence is increasingly clear that e-cigarettes are significantly less harmful to health than smoking tobacco. The government, as we outlined in the new plan, is committed to supporting consumers in stopping smoking and adopting the use of less harmful nicotine products. It is now the case that e-cigarettes have become by far the most popular smoking quitting aid in the country today. The evidence is that they can help smokers to quit, particularly when combined with additional support from local stop smoking services. That's why the TCP asked Public Health England to include messages about the relative safety of e-cigarettes in their quit smoking campaigns this Stoptober. I look forward very much, when the data is available, to seeing how that has played out. There has never been a better time to quit, and I'm hopeful this Stoptober will show many people took that up. I'm pleased to say this is already underway, and last month's Stoptober campaign, for the first time, highlighted e-cigarettes among the array of tools that smokers can use to improve their chances of quitting successfully. Public Health England, for whom I am responsible, are already preparing their New Year quitting campaign, in which they will reprise these messages. You'll be pleased to know, Mr. Howarth, it's through this consistent messaging, I think, that we can hope to reverse the harmful, mistaken and increasingly widespread belief that vaping is no safer than smoking. Now, my honourable friend raised the issue of independent evidence on e-cigarettes. He's right to do so. I'd like to reassure him that the government is utterly committed to rigorous scrutiny of the evidence on e-cigarettes. We don't do non-evidence-based policy making, and nor should we. So in this spirit, I would highlight, as he did, highly reputable organisations such as Cancer Research UK, led by the brilliant Sir Harpal Kumar, Royal College of Physicians, which a number of members have mentioned this morning. They've come out in support of e-cigarettes, rightly, as a measure to stop people from smoking, ultimately move to no nicotine dependency. Indeed, I'd like to commend the work being done by the UK E-Cigarette Research Forum. It's an initiative developed by Cancer Research UK in partnership with us and Public Health England and the UK Centre for Tobacco and Alcohol Studies. The forum brings together policymakers, researchers, practitioners and the NGO community to discuss the emerging evidence and knowledge gaps there is about e-cigarettes. And there are big knowledge gaps. Member for Ipswich referred to that a number of times. Groups like this will allow us to keep strengthening the evidence base on e-cigarettes, as members have called for this morning. Also note with interest that New Zealand, and we do look around the world for our evidence base, of course, New Zealand Ministry of Health has recently published a position statement on e-cigarettes, recognising their potential contribution to achieving their smoke-free 2025 goal, Mr. Howarth. However, there are rightly genuine concerns from the public about the benefits and potential long-term dangers of e-cigarettes and new novel, so-called novel tobacco products. We take these concerns seriously, and I think that we should, as any responsible government would, and as we outline in the plan, the Department will monitor the impact of regulation and policy on e-cigarettes and novel tobacco products in England, including evidence on safety, on uptake, on the health impact and the effectiveness of these products as smoking cessation aids to inform the actions that we take going forward and regulating their use. That has to be the right thing to do, Mr. Howarth. Public Health England will also update their evidence report on e-cigarettes and other novel nicotine delivery systems annually by the end of the Parliament in 2022. In the spirit of independent scrutiny, a couple of members have mentioned this morning, I welcome of course, the recent announcements by the Science and Technology Committee. I know the Right Honourable Member for North Norfolk, who I spoke to the other day, is unable to be here this morning, but he obviously chairs that committee. It will hold an independent inquiry to examine the impact of electronic cigarettes on human health, the suitability of the regulations guiding their use and the financial implications of a growing market on both businesses and the NHS. I think this is an excellent opportunity for an independent view of the risks and benefits of e-cigarettes, and what's not to like when you're the minister and people are doing research for you and paying for it for you. The government has a statutory duty, of course, not leaving it all to everybody else, to conduct an implementation review of the tobacco and related products regulations by the end of May 2021 to assess its impact, and we will, of course, do that. Now, Mr. Howarth, let me touch upon the regulatory framework introduced by the EU Tobacco Products Directive, which my honourable friend, the member for Dartford, mentioned. The directive has enabled us to introduce measures to regulate e-cigarettes to reduce the risk of harm to children and protect any risk of renormalisation of tobacco use, provide assurance on relative safety for users and provide legal certainty for businesses. The inclusion of e-cigarettes, I think, in the directive ensures that we can sensibly regulate these products. It's not perfect, and nobody pretends that it is, but I do believe it gives a sensible basis for regulation. And my honourable friend asks me to put March 2019 in my diary. It is inked in the diary, I must tell the House. We will, with one leap, we will be free, and we will, of course, be able to take back control, as the phrase goes, and we will, of course, look at every regulation that we are subject to, and it will be an opportunity for us to review them and go through them with a fine-tooth comb, and I will do so in every area that I'm responsible for. He has my assurance on that. I recognise, Mr. Howarth, that there are real concerns that vaping is a gateway for youth smoking, and the member for Gordon touched on this. However, there's no great evidence that we have in the UK that they're leading young people to smoke. There's some evidence that some young people experiment with e-cigarettes, but that regular e-cigarette use is confined almost entirely to young people who have smoked, and the gateway out as opposed to the gateway in. To ensure this remains the case, Mr. Howarth, we have implemented domestic age of sale legislation preventing the sale of e-cigarettes to under 18s and prohibited advertising and promotion of e-cigarettes in the major media streams, including TV, radio, newspapers and the internet. By and large, the banned media streams are those with the largest reach, I think, and in controlling these streams, we have significantly reduced children's exposure to marketing and images of these products. The government has no plans to ban advertising in other media at this time, but of course we keep everything under review. Mr. Howarth, I'd say there is a vibrant e-cigarette market in the UK. It is in many ways a business success story. With nearly 2.4 million users, I said at the outset, it's an industry worth nearly £1 billion to the UK economy. It started out from a very small, independent, non-tobacco industry organisations, cottage industries, if you like, with the intent to design solutions for people to have the benefits of nicotine delivery without the harms from smoking. My department does, and of course will continue to work closely with the vaping sector through the Independent British Vape Trade Association. The department does not with the UK Vaping Industry Association because of its links to the tobacco industry. The UK government, Her Majesty's government, takes its duties seriously, as it should, as a signatory to the World WHO's Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. Under Article 5.3, I feel I should put this on the record, of the treaty, we've committed to protect our public health policies from the commercial and other vested interests of the tobacco industry. Article 5.3 permits parties to engage with, quotes, the tobacco industry only when, to the extent strictly necessary, to enable them to effectively regulate the tobacco industry and tobacco products. Now, Mr. Howarth, I will briefly mention another area of innovation, namely heat not burn, and my shadow, the Honourable Lady for Washington and Sunderland West, asked about this. 2 heat not burn products have been notified for use on the UK market as novel tobacco products. It's important to stress that in comparison to e-cigarettes, this market is, even in comparison to e-cigarettes, this market is relatively new and currently very small scale in the UK. We simply don't know enough about these products at the moment, and we'll continue to adopt, I think, a pragmatic and a sensible and a level-headed, cool-headed approach to regulation based on the best possible public health advice that I receive from those who advise me, including Public Health England. As part of this evidence, the Committee on Toxicity has been asked by my department to give a view in terms of their potential harm reduction in comparison to conventional smoking. The committee is due to respond later this year. I'll look out for that. I hope that helps the Honourable Lady. I know, yes, she said, I know she will remain on my case. That is not in doubt, Mr. Howarth. Now, we do discuss Brexit this day, next day, and the day after, and probably the day after that as well. I think there are some concerns for those in the industry and e-cigarette users around the introduction of the EU Tobacco Products Directive impacting on e-cigarette innovation and consumer choice, Mr. Howarth. So as stated in the Tobacco Control Plan, the government will review where the UK's exit from the EU offers opportunities to replace current tobacco and e-cigarette regulation to ensure this continues to protect the nation's health. Now, in conclusion, I think there's any other particular points. I just want, yes, the member for Ipswich spoke excellently, as always. Congratulations to him on his quitting and not going back. Excellent. I thought the member for Linlithgow and East Falkirk, excellent innovation as always, and very calm, sensible speech. Well done for getting his birthday on the record. That is clearly now also inked in our diaries. In conclusion, Mr. Howell, I mean, the Honourable Lady for Washington and Sunderland West referred to something new and shiny. This is something new and shiny. It's got literally, isn't it? Something new and shiny. But it is not for ministers to get carried away by something new and shiny in any way, shape or form. I think the government has been criticised for being too tough on e-cigarettes. We've also been criticised for being too lenient on e-cigarettes. That suggests to me that at the moment we have the balance about right while we look for more evidence. We have proportionate regulation in place which allows us to protect children, and that's absolutely right. We are keeping the evidence under constant review. We are absolutely... Yes, before I finish, yeah.
For giving way. I mentioned to him previously that he may wish to meet with the vaping industry. He's very grateful for the fact he's indicated that he's got the Brexit date in his diary. I wonder if the Minister would be kind enough to indicate whether he's willing to put in his diary the potential for meeting with the vaping industry.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Howarth. Well, I mean, look, I mentioned about that we work closely with, and I'm perfectly happy to meet with the Independent British Vape Trade Association, but I also did mention the WHO Framework Convention, and we do take that seriously. So, you know, the door is always open to those that we can meet with. And as I say, that's all part of us trying to understand the evidence base. We are clear, to conclude, we are clear that e-cigarettes can play a very useful role in helping people to quit smoking. the majority of smokers, as the lead on today's debate, the member for Dartford has said, I think want to quit. We should help them. E-cigarettes are one of a variety of stop smoking tools available to help support this. Thank you very much.
Gareth Johnson to wind up.
Howard, very, very briefly, if I could reiterate what I said at the end of my speech, is that no one in this debate is pretending that e-cigarettes, vaping is without risk, but they do offer potentially the best hope that we've had ever, perhaps, in helping people to quit smoking, which is what this is all about. Potentially, vaping can save millions of lives worldwide, and therefore it's a product that should be looked at very, very seriously with an open mind and with an evidence-based approach. And if we can do that and take advantage of the opportunities that it brings to this country, to the health and well-being of this country and worldwide, then I think that the whole world will be better as a consequence, Mr. Howarth. I thank the Minister for his response and for the Shadow Minister for her contribution to, and to all members who've contributed to this debate.
The question is that this House has considered vaping. As many of that opinion say aye? Of the very half-hearted. As many of that opinion say aye? Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order.